So before we go any further in this video, my fellow advocates, I have a confession to make. I am a lone wolf. Now, when I mentioned that I am a lone wolf, I recently realized this when I checked out this YouTube video. And the title of the YouTube video is The 10 Obvious Signs of a Lone Wolf. Now, when we think about lone wolves, we may refer to them as introverts or loners, perhaps outcast. But for me personally, I like the term lone wolf. It sounds cooler, it's more dope. So for me personally, I'm going to go with lone wolf. And that is who I am. And I actually came to that conclusion, or I was reminded of this because when I checked out that video on YouTube, it mentioned the 10 obvious signs of a lone wolf. And I got to tell you, 10 out of 10 of those signs was 100% me. It was me. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It wasn't 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. It was 10 out of 10. I related to that video on so many levels. It was something else. So what I wanted to do and what I have been doing, I've been having a discussion. I've been sharing my viewpoint, my perspective on these 10 obvious signs of a lone wolf. Now, I already started part 1 of the discussion on my podcast, the Growth Times Infinity podcast. So I definitely want to take this moment to encourage you to check out the video description below. And there are at least 2 links in there. The first link is a reference to the video that I mentioned, the 10 obvious signs of a lone wolf, the YouTube video. The link to that video is in the description below. Also, along with that, part 1 of my lone wolf discussion on the Growth Times Infinity podcast. The link to that is in the description as well. So once again, I want to encourage you to check that out. But in the meantime, I wanted to start part 2 of this discussion. I wanted to bring it to y'all on this YouTube channel because I felt like that on the Growth Times Infinity podcast, 1 episode wasn't enough to hold this discussion. So instead of doing a part 2 on the podcast, I want to do it on the Reggie the Growth Advocate YouTube channel. So here it is, y'all. Here is part 2 of the lone wolf discussion. I already mentioned signs 1 through 5. So we're going to start here with sign number 6, the obvious signs of a lone wolf. So sign number 6 is lone wolves work when they're working alone. It boosts their creativity. So let's say with lone wolves like myself, we may be in a space where, perhaps we are in a group discussion, a group setting. Perhaps we go to a conference or a networking event. Now, a lot of times, if we are in a group, we're either listening attentively or we are standing idly by doing a group discussion. We don't have any input. We're just there to listen. So from there, once we get into a space of solitude, that's when our creative juices start going. That's when our creative juices starts flowing. And in turn, what we're able to do is we're able to remember what was discussed in that group setting, in that space. And then once we get into that space of solitude, that's where we get our best ideas. We have time to think about things. And from there, we can apply that information accordingly. Most of our best ideas, once again, come from when we are alone and also when we are away from distractions. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a group setting. It could be a work setting, or it could be any space where there's a lot going on, where there's a lot of people around, where there's a lot of noise around. But once we get into our place, once we get by ourselves, whether it's, I'm here in my home office. If I'm in my home office, my best ideas come to me in my home office. If I'm driving, if I'm rolling one deep, I get a lot of great ideas when I'm rolling one deep. When I'm by myself in nature, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Being by ourselves in nature, perhaps you're at a local park or something where you're by yourself. That's where a lot of our ideas come from. So, sign number 6 of a lone wolf is working alone boosts our creativity. Sign number 7, you value quality over quantity. And for that applies to 2 areas of our lives. And that's people and the work that we put in, the tasks that we perform. Now let's talk about people. When it comes to friends, when it comes to the social media where we have followers, we have friends on Facebook, we have connections on LinkedIn. We really don't have a desire to have a bunch of people in our space. Whether it's in person, whether we call people our friends, we call people our associates. We don't have a desire to have a bunch of those people in our lives. When it comes to social media, we don't have a desire to have a bunch of followers on certain social media sites, or once again, I mentioned, a bunch of connections. Now, we're not opposed to it, but the thing about it is we prefer quality over quantity. So when it comes to people in our spaces, we prefer those people to be quality people, regardless of the number. As long as they're quality people, that's all that matters. We prefer to connect with people who like us for who we truly are. We can be ourselves. We don't have to fake. We don't have to hide ourselves because we feel like, well, this person won't like me or whatever the case may be. We prefer to be around the people who love us and respect us for who we are as lone wolves. Now, when it comes to the work that we put in, when it comes to tasks, and I want to take this moment to talk about multitasking. There was a point, even recently, even this year, I would speak highly of multitasking, which multitasking is good. Multitasking can be great, but multitasking is not for everybody. And I learned that applies to me because I was real big on multitasking. My thought was if I can do as much as possible in the least amount of time as possible, I felt like that I can get the job done, that I can get goals accomplished, that I can get things done. But what I learned, and I continue to learn as I go along on my journey, I learned that it is much better, it is much effective when we do one task at a time. We're more productive. Our work comes out much better. We get things done in a timely manner. And that applies to lone wolf. When it comes to people and when it comes to the work that we put in, we prefer quality over quantity. And that's the 7th obvious sign of a lone wolf. Sign number 8, you feel a strong connection to nature. All my lone wolves out there, it's something about nature that brings us peace, that brings us peace of mind, that brings us calmness. It's something about nature. It's something about God's creation, which is so amazing. And I'll share a personal story with you real quick. I'll try to be brief as possible. I remember I was traveling about a couple of years ago, and there was this stretch from Memphis to Nashville. It was about like an hour, maybe an hour and a half stretch. And it was just so beautiful. It was full of trees. It was full of clear water. And I was just amazed on my drive there. See, it's something like that amazes me as a lone wolf. Also, if you go to like a local park, if you go to the woods, that type of thing, just being one with nature, it's something about nature. What it does is it has a tendency to boost our creativity, right? and it also restores our energy. So nature is dope like that. Nature is amazing, especially when you are a lone wolf. And also, nature reminds us that it's more to life than the busyness in our lives, the hectic things that we have to go through. You know, when it comes to our jobs, when it comes to our careers, when it comes to the home life. When we get out in nature, it's just an amazing reminder of how precious life is. So lone wolves, that's the eighth sign. We feel a strong connection to nature. The ninth sign, the obvious sign of a lone wolf, is that we are independent thinkers. We have the power to think for ourselves. We don't allow other people, we don't allow society to dictate the way that we think, dictate the way that we see things. Because you have to admit, there's so much going on out there. You know, you got people in the media, you got people online, they say this and that or whatever. You got the news that we're consuming these things, right? And many of us fall for that stuff. Many of us fall for the okie doke. But for the most part, with lone wolves, we can think for ourselves. We see things the way that we see it based on our values and our beliefs. So that's the ninth sign that lone wolves are independent thinkers. The last sign that I want to share with you, the 10th obvious sign of a lone wolf, is that we take time for self-reflection. Now, for many of you who've been tuning into my YouTube channel, the Reggie the Growth Advocate YouTube channel, those of you who be checking out the Growth Times Infinity podcast on a regular basis, y'all know this is my jam. Self-reflection, aka self-inventory. Y'all know that this is one of my favorite topic of discussions. Self-inventory, self-reflection. That's what lone wolves are all about. We take the time to just analyze things. We take the time to find ways to better ourselves. We take the time to find clarity when we're doing self-reflection, self-inventory. And these things in turn, I mentioned before, it boosts our creativity and productivity. And it also, it gives us an opportunity to strengthen our relationships. So that's what self-inventory is all about. People know, y'all know that I love self-inventory. It gives us also to make better decisions in our life. So that's one thing about lone wolves. We love self-inventory. We love self-reflection. So I just shared with you a total between the podcast and the YouTube channel. I just shared with you the 10 obvious signs of a lone wolf. So peace and blessings to you as you continue your journey. So let me know what you think about this topic. Let me know, for those who are watching, can you relate to this? Where my lone wolves at? I would love to receive feedback from you. Feel free to leave a comment below. Are you a lone wolf? And maybe you feel like you are not a lone wolf. Do any of these signs relate to you? Maybe one of these signs, two, maybe a few. And if that's the case, you may not identify yourself as a lone wolf. You might see yourself as an extrovert instead of an introvert, but yet you may have lone wolf tendencies. There is a such thing. So I would love to hear from you. Once again, I would love to receive your feedback. Are you a lone wolf? Is there anything that sticks out that I shared with you? Just feel free to reach out to me, y'all, by leaving a comment below. And also, once again, I want to encourage you to check out the latest episode of the Growth Times Infinity podcast, where I discuss part 1 of being a lone wolf. And once again, that link is in the description below. I am Reggie the Growth Advocate, and I appreciate you all tuning into this video. And until the next time, Keep growing and keep going.